Hi all. I'm Barry Nguyen, the founder and CEO of Cliniscribes. So we're one of the many scribes available in the market, specializing in allied health. So the idea here is, as an initiative, is monthly. I plan to catch up with a fellow allied health practitioner who is using a scribe or a big advocate of a scribe to share views on its use and other things around the idea of AI and how it's going to impact our future as allied health practitioners. So this is the first episode, so we're going to keep it really casual. It's just something short, um, to allow you to quickly have a look at in your lunch break or while driving the kids or dropping off at school. So I have David Lopis here. He's prolific on LinkedIn. I've met him in person, which is what I prefer. Just to get an idea, despite the digital nature of everything these days. Um, he's very well regarded in the psychology community around mentoring others, as well as advocating the use of AI responsibly. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Barry. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so would you perhaps introduce a bit about yourself and how you got involved in AI?
Sure. I started playing around with it sort of late 2022 with a tool called Jasper, then ChatGPT, and was really blown away by all the different kinds of capabilities. And then had all these discussions with some supervisees of mine and other psychologists around what you could do, and getting all these really blank looks, discovering that there wasn't this kind of understanding of different ways that you could be using AI as a clinician, and kind of made it my project to grow the space and to build an understanding of what AI can do, how it can serve both clients and clinicians, and promoting responsible and ethical use of AI. So I help psychologists and other clinicians to better understand where to get started, what are some ethical and regulatory type considerations, whether you're a sole practitioner running a clinic, or even in schools. I just think it's so important to get this conversation going so that we can better understand how we can use the available tools to our advantage.
Oh, fantastic. So far, what do you use a particular scribe or scribes or even AI tools in your clinic?
So I guess, making myself this project to build an understanding of all the different kinds of available AI scribes in Australia, that are compliant with Australian privacy principles, and so therefore able to be used in that way, and to try to promote an awareness of the different kinds of features that there are. Just because if I picked just one or two, it's then I would be an employee of that company effectively. There are so many different kinds of features for so many different kinds of purposes that I think it's more helpful if I can assist the community to better understand what there is out there. So full disclosure, I am having various different kinds of, advertising and affiliate relationships with a few, but I do like to suggest what different kinds of features there are out there, so that you can build an awareness, not just kind of picking the one or two, but there are the AI scribes, but I think it's also important to be aware of tools for all sorts of different kinds of other purposes. For example, tools that can do instant presentations, to better understand how you can use tools like ChatGPT and Claude, how you can use tools for prompt enhancing. So there are lots of different kinds of tools out there, and happy to go more into any of those.
Fantastic. I'm thinking it is practical for the users or the audience, which we have a wide range of practitioners. So it might not be a psychologist, but I'm sure we can generalize these learnings that you've had to other areas. Um, I guess I'm going to ask the first question. What for your clinical work, what do you generally use ChatGPT for and why?
Um, So what I think ChatGPT is most helpful for, considering you're not able to put in confidential, identifiable client information. That's going to be limiting your ability to really get too much more specific on, on working with it in that way. But you can still, generate treatment plans, psychoeducation sheets. You can do, even for example, when working with a client, if they wanted to explore various options available to them given the challenges in their circumstance to provide some information, which could be a bit about the client's challenges, bit about what kinds of considerations might be entertained in terms of their life choices and what kinds of options they'd like to know more about and to sort of build up their capabilities and understanding their circumstances through using ChatGPT in that way. So really, for any written task or anything that you might otherwise work through with a client, you might be able to use AI to assist them. And to sort of better understand and explore where they're coming from and their challenges, but also how they can work through it.
Excellent point there. So do you use the paid version or the free version?
I use the paid version. I think you get better sophisticated. I think models, as in you'll be able to do more with the tools, have better answers, better formatting of answers even. And I find I use it for even if I'm going to send, say, an email. I might draft bits and pieces of it and then dump it into ChatGPT and say, make this better formatted, put in bolding and numbering, and make it better, more readable. And
No.
then, that would then just be constructed in a much more accessible way. So, lots of uses.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that because I've used both, and the actual paid version, even the 4.0 model there, is better than the free version, because I think the 4.0 model in the free version is the mini, while you get the full 4.0 model in the paid version now, which is a lot better. I find overall with accuracy, less hallucinations, etc. And there's also recently launched the 4.5 model. Have you tried that yet, Dave?
Yeah, I've played around with it. It's it's just at breakneck speed, all the changes and new models and new capabilities. So it's very hard to know like what can you do at this level, but not at that level, and what are the different advantages. But I think over time, ChatGPT will be able to select for you based on your request what's most suitable, and then take that take that guesswork out.
So apparently the 4.5 model is even more accurate, has high EQ. So
Yeah.
maybe it's getting towards your area, mate. So I find the 4.5 model better overall at writing things, feels less robotic than 4.0.
Hmm.
But having said that, even with 4.0, with the right prompts, you can actually get it to that level as well. So it's kind of like thinking more thinking sort of thing there. And do you use the deep research tool?
I've played around with it a few times, um, and it seems to be very good. I think for many clinicians, they're going to see different AI tools and be wondering what are the good use cases for them? What are the good ways that's going to be making use of their time? That's not just gadgety, that's not just like, ooh, but not all that helpful for their work. And I think all the good use cases will start to develop over time. But I want to also impress upon your viewers, that if you are feeling overwhelmed and you're not quite sure where this is all headed, that you're not alone. And I think, if you're wanting to, for example, explore your particular modality of working or a particular approach to a client or patient problem and use something like deep research, you might find that's very interesting and helpful. However, if you're wanting to use to access actual research, then through consensus, which is a GPT and ChatGPT, you can actually get it to access peer-reviewed research that's recent and ask research questions and then go in and check the sources to get more definitive answers. So I think it's also helpful to think what is the right tool for the right kinds of for the particular question you're asking.
Yep. And do you use it for professional development too? So we've talked about sort of creating treatment plans, you know, brainstorming therapies, that type of stuff. Do you use it to teach other psychologists to do things? Are there any specific things, case studies that can be leveraged there?
Well, in terms of the first part of the question, like in terms of how I've used it for developing professional development, whenever I've done a presentation, I might put it into a PDF, drag it into ChatGPT, and ask it, how could I make this better? What could I make, more accessible, interesting, deeper? Where are the opportunities to improve this PD that I am running? You could also, use it to better understand where you could access other PD. So, for example, with ChatGPT, you are wanting to know where could I learn more about EMDR that's in my local area, and you click on the little search button down the bottom, the web search, then you could get it to construct a table of where can I do EMDR, what's the pricing, what's the location, and have that all accessible in seconds in any area of PD you're
That's
wanting
very
to
good.
grow a knowledge to grow your knowledge. So yeah, so there are definitely lots of uses in the sort of PD space.
And you mentioned Claude as well. When do you use that instead of ChatGPT? Or did you just group them together, as in it's kind of muchness using either one?
I think it's going to be increasingly much of a muchness as they develop. Like I'm sure there'll be some finer points where, more, where programmers will say, well, if you're doing this particular type of task, then you must use Claude. If you're using that, then, ChatGPT or Perplexity might be, perhaps another tool that's kind of useful in other instances. I haven't found major differences, but when I've been creating GPTs in ChatGPT, I don't know if you're aware of you're
Yeah.
using GPTs, yeah. So when you have to write a set of instructions to create a GPT. I wanted to cheat and get ChatGPT to make up a set of instructions for me, giving it a brief. It didn't understand that. Whereas when I explained in Claude to do this for me, it got the brief and I could just dump that to a GPT. But I mean, you could try playing around with different models of ChatGPT, compare it. But I think increasingly, your findings are going to get out of date because within a week, a month, the tools become more sophisticated, and whatever your findings were from your little experiment in the past is no longer going to apply. So it's very difficult to stay up to date in that way because of how much the technology is evolving.
Yep. Very good answer there. So yeah, a tip there, just experiment with different.
Yeah,
They
absolutely.
always change. I think they're all racing and fighting against each other to get better. So I think, yeah, I agree with you on that point that it's kind of like ChatGPT doesn't do a certain thing now, but then a month later you notice it does. An example,
Yeah,
Perplexity came out with that deep research tool free, and now you've
yeah,
got GPT and you've got it free on Gemini now too. And
yeah.
so, but yeah, no, that's great. So distinction wise, when would you not use ChatGPT and need, right? Like a one that's compliant uh, to data privacy security laws.
Yeah, I think that's a really important and helpful question in the space because all too often I'm hearing about clinicians using ChatGPT when they probably shouldn't be. So I guess when you're kind of crossing that line between it being more identifiable client information is probably when you really should be looking at the compliant tool. So what I mean by that is somewhere there is a line, and I don't think it's as hard and fast as we might like to appreciate, but somewhere there is that line that if I was to type into ChatGPT, I have a client with social anxiety. I think many clinicians will think, you know what, there's no line being crossed there. It's so general. This isn't going to pinpoint one particular client down. They're not going to be able to find my client based on that information.
Right.
But then maybe I might add, well, they've got workplace issues. They're struggling with communication, A, B, C, D. And you might think, you know what, this is still very, very broad. But somewhere along the line, I might, if you were to increasingly add information and, add their street address or their cultural issues or you might just begin to think, what, this is taking this too far.
So
You
this
know,
this is a yeah, this is a great point.
yeah. And I think it's really tricky to know where that line is. But
Hmm.
if you think you're going to cross that line into it becoming too identifiable, then it's probably more important for you to be thinking of a compliant tool with Australian privacy principles. And so, for many people, their practice management software choices will have been, requiring those tools to have that degree of compliance. But AI tools very much as well should also have those, have that compliance in mind as well. But unfortunately, at the moment, it's all self-reported that they are compliant. It's a whole other discussion. Um, but there are, tools like Bastion GPT that allows for you to use a kind of like a chat GPT-like environment, to be able to interact, but have that Australian privacy principle set up. But there are quite a few other types of tools that also have that kind of chatbot type function.
Okay. Because I've had this kind of I mean running a startup in this space, I've had this objection, why don't you just use ChatGPT to do that? So I
Yeah,
think it's good to highlight when you do need it and when not. So this is not a sales right
yeah,
call.
yeah,
So sometimes, yeah, I mean, everyone wants to save money, right? And no one wants to pay for extra subscriptions as an allied health practitioner when it's
yeah,
unnecessary.
yeah.
So I guess moving on to that point, like, when do you think it is super necessary? Like, when should you consider paying for one of these tools like Bastion or some of the scribes?
So the big sell
Yes.
for those tools is for clinicians who have notes and who have reports that they don't want to have to do all the groundwork for. That's probably the main use in the profession. So probably I would estimate it cuts down. Keen to hear your thoughts on this. Probably I'd say 80 to 90% of the time that you might have otherwise taken to complete that. So before a session begins, you'll have a consent related discussion, you'll hit record. At the end of the session, you'll hit stop, and then it will convert the session transcript effectively into the preferred notes or preferred report sort of template based on one note or multiple notes, so that that big admin load is cut down significantly. Now, it's still important for the human in the loop to be setting it all up right and to be checking it before any of this is finalized. And there are lots of other main benefits of these AI scribes as well. But I really think the main sell is the cutting down of time. But there's also a major sell on the ability to help you individualize your work because of better understanding the client.
Yeah, I mean, have you had circumstances where the patient doesn't consent to uh, the scribe doing its work in the psych,
Yeah.
which I
Yeah.
think is perhaps more sensitive in than my profession, which is physio in many cases.
Yeah, so there are lots of instances where clients have said no, and this is going to pose different kinds of challenges, I think. In many instances, when the adult sort of says no, I think most clinicians will acknowledge that this is a done deal. They won't use AI. They'll just be more traditional in how they'll take notes on their pen and paper or computer in their however they would otherwise work. However, there are some other instances where I have heard of clinicians who might take that as permission to rather type in the client's information afterwards into an AI tool and at various different degrees of detail. And I think that also raises some challenging ethical questions, that if they say no, do we still go ahead with typing it out, which I don't feel all that comfortable with, to be honest. And then there are all these kinds of messy situations with children, which is, where if the child says yes, the child's your client, but both the parents say no, or one of the parents say no, or there are custody and, related issues and court orders, it becomes very, very messy. This
Yeah.
whole sort of, consent related discussion.
Right. Yeah, I think that area personally is an opportunity to improve from all the solutions. I also think, so what in terms of like a psychologist using ChatGPT, do you use it in front of the patient so they can see that you've got ChatGPT open? You just outputted something, for example, like a treatment plan, and then you edit it and then you chuck it into your clinic's template, or what's your workflow in that, just to give an idea of how you um, would use, for example, a generation of a treatment plan or brainstorming something.
I think most of it wouldn't be with the client around per se,
Yep.
so that they're not sort of having to be a part of your prompting, your, you know, further prompts and your, what you're doing with your practice management software and all of that. Like I think most of the time, well, most clinicians won't do that with the client present. If it's an exercise that the client might benefit from, so for example, as I mentioned, like developing of a routine for
Yep.
their week, or exploring options, or any of those, probably doing something like a psychoeducation sheet. You could probably take a few moments to do before the session, or after, and email it to them. I'd probably be suggesting. So I think depending on the tool and depending on the use, but most of the time wouldn't do that with the client necessarily.
Yep. Good point. Um, so any limitations or issues you've seen with these tools? Have you had a situation where you've recorded, say, a 1 hour conversation, chat, and then it hallucinated completely or was very odd?
I,
Without
I
mentioning any names.
I haven't personally had too many of those kinds of situations, but there are lots of horror stories of
Yep.
hallucinations, errors, failed recordings.
Yeah.
And so I think this lends itself to some really helpful considerations around backup plans, around the failed recording. So what I mean by that, which I think is what anyone should do anyway, is to take a few key notes during even a recorded session, just very general, just in case everything hits the fan, so that all's not lost. One could also take a secondary recording on your phone, as well as your computer, if you wanted to be extra safe in that way too. But in terms of the hallucinations and mistakes, I think that is a a critical consideration, and therefore, when you have the human in the loop, in terms of finalizing and checking everything before,
Yep.
before you put your stuff in practice management software, before you send your report to the GP or whatever, that you are checking, because you cannot assume it's going to be correct. Interestingly enough, I saw some research around AI being used to check AI for mistakes, and it was able to cut down mistakes very significantly. And so I think what we'll find over time is such tools will be used, but that's not to discount the benefit and the critical necessity of the human still finalizing any particular task. But ultimately, in order to reduce the likelihood of all of this, I really encourage clinicians before they start using tools to to learn about AI, to go off and do training that is going to be provided by the AI scribes, or for shameless promotion by myself around uses of AI and ethical and responsible use, so that they get a bit of a sense as to what this is all about, what kind of mistakes, what kind of issues can arise, because the stakes are very high if things don't go quite right, because reports could go in front of the court, in front of courts,
Absolutely.
and that's going to happen very, very soon, I think. And if consent is not done properly, I've seen some indications this might actually be criminal. If consent hasn't taken place properly, and could lead to, I suppose, legal action, imprisonment and criminal action. If consent is not done appropriately, and there's questions around, should it just be the first session? Should it be every session? So you know, lots of ethical issues.
Yeah, I mean the APRA don't really they don't take consent issues lightly, at least for physios.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's probably very similar for psychologists too.
absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So we just launched our own ambient scribe, and it does. We actually use the AI to check the AI. So just as a note, what it does is if it kind of gets confused, like it doesn't quite fit in, what it will do in the output for our software would say check. So, say if there's like a muffled response or something weird coming out from the transcript. So
Hmm.
and I think that's really helpful because then it forces the clinician to check to see if there's any highlighted issues during the recording. Um, and then yeah, that's an interesting way things will be moving, I think, forward. And I love the idea that you still should be taking some notes in the consult. I don't think it's a bad thing from a client perspective, at least from my own physio experience.
Yeah.
Sometimes taking some notes does show you care. Letting the AI do everything. And last point I have is, yeah, that I've spoken to like sort of specialist physios who get involved in investigations, around, uh, conduct issues, and they don't take AI generated notes lightly too. So it's probably better that you can show, in your hygiene, your note hygiene, that you've made an effort to edit things, check things. Otherwise, yeah, that could be an issue for you. But yeah, great tips there, David. So hard question. What do
Yeah.
you think these scribes are currently lacking in the market at the moment?
Oh, great question. What they're lacking.
Lacking, or there's an opportunity if you want to
Yeah,
in a positive way, or problems they're not solving?
yeah. Uh, Look, I think at the moment there is still a reliability problem. Just from what I'm hearing, in terms of having the ability to just do what you got to do, to know that it's going to be saving fully, to know that you can just count on it. I just don't think we're quite there yet, and that is the biggest problem. I'm also hearing unfortunate stories of support being slow and inadequate, and I think that's a customer service problem and a staffing problem to be managed. Um, I I really like the idea with one tool, which is called Everbility, where they have the ability you can verify the sources of the information that's gone into a report. And I'd like to see that kind of idea across more tools so that you can see where this information's come from that's informing the note and report. And that I think is lacking and is an opportunity because otherwise where that question is always like, where does this information come from that's made up our report? And it would be great if we could use research to be informing our report rather than just this kind of mysterious sort of source of information at the moment. So I think that will be really exciting. And unfortunately, we're at this time that I think a lot of clinicians, as you kind of alluded to, have this sort of subscription sickness, don't want another, subscription. And there are going to be few different tools that have different kinds of things that they're offering. And someone might want a bit of this from that tool and that from that tool, and then kind of get overwhelmed, which might lead to some real sort of uncertainty. So lots of different sort of considerations around where this is all headed. But I also appreciate from the perspective of the sort of AI scribes that every 5 minutes the models change, something news happening, some new features that are worth considering, and managing the marketing and the features and the customer service is a lot to be thinking about sort of in this space. And of course all the ethical and responsible AI considerations as well and compliance. So I hope that's kind of answered your question.
That's a great answer. So last question here. What is a very odd or abnormal way you've seen AI used? in your practice that is really useful?
Uh,
That's kind of unusual. So we hear reports, we hear transcription, yeah, we brainstorm for treatment ideas.
what's really different that I stumbled upon on actually on LinkedIn, that I think is my most sort of abnormal type of use that was really interesting, because ChatGPT can remember all that you've done on it, um, for better or worse, mind you, but because it can. Um, there was a prompt, which set of prompts which I played around with, which was really interesting, which was to the effect something like, based on what you know about me, tell me what I need to know about how I am, about my inner psyche, about how I work, and what I need to improve on personally. How it can understand that based on my prompts. And then the next after it's done that, the level two is no hold like tell me more. You might have been polite and generous in what you just said, but I
Be
want to know,
brutally honest.
be
Most,
brutally honest. And then that's the level two. And then you try level three, which is no holds barred. Tell me all I need to know right
yeah,
now
yeah.
about, and they were absolutely fascinating what
Wow.
they came up with about me. And it wasn't this general sort of like, things that could apply to everyone. I thought it was very much about me. And I've shared that set of prompts with quite a few other people who've likewise used this as a self-analysis of some of sorts. And it's unexpected to people to be able to use AI and ChatGPT in that way, because it has that understanding. You can ask those kinds of questions, and if you continue to use it over time, it can be helpful for you on a personal level. It can be helpful for you on a professional level. You ask it, what are some themes from my work that are, I've been focused on, or what are some themes that I haven't been focused on, but that could enhance what I'm doing. And so you have this whole meta exploration, in order to sort of further develop as well. Which again is going to become increasingly sophisticated over time.
Yeah, I mean, I use that, and I also upload my journal, my daily personal journal, just
Yeah.
context, and I love it. It's my thing on the I know uh it's recommended for people.
Yeah.
It's always on brutally honest mode,
Yeah, right.
always. So it doesn't fluff around with me at all, with anything.
Yeah.
Unless it's there a great thing. Sometimes, I don't want to see reality, but
Yes.
that's my mode.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, I'd love to share the prompts to the audience of your
Sure.
to try.
Yeah,
But
I'll paste it to you to share.
yeah, yeah, awesome, awesome. That sounds good. Yeah, and yeah. So yeah, thanks for your time. So if they want to know more about what you do and your business,
Yeah.
do the spiel. Go for it. What?
Sure. So, what I do is help clinicians understand how to get started in AI. What are the issues related to their AI use for clinicians in Australia, especially if they're APRA clinicians, but also, I've worked with social workers, doctors, cardiologists, sort of obviously to general mental health as well, and can run webinars, workshops, one-to-one consulting to sort of better understand what is this all about? What are my options? And help you explore your sort of AI journey. So probably best to get in touch is just to contact me on LinkedIn, David Lopis, Lopis. And I also have a Facebook group, AI for Australian Psychology, by Psychology Squared, that anyone's welcome to join, but it is more so tailored towards Australian psychologists. If anyone has any questions, don't hesitate to be in touch, and I'm happy to see how I can assist.
No, yeah, yeah. I think you got about 3,000 or so followers. In
Yeah, I think
around
about
that.
3,700-ish thereabouts last I
Yeah,
checked.
I'm
Yeah.
in that, and I find the content there's really useful, and you'll get a lot of value from just following David on LinkedIn. He's very generous with his knowledge and what he shares, and
Thank
it's
you.
quite interesting to see what he also comments on and
Thank
like.
you.
So, yeah, yeah. Please, highly encouraged to follow David. I can see. adds so much value, not just to psychology, but all the rest of the health profession. So yeah,
Thank you.
if you're not sure, just follow him and you'll see. Oh, you
Thank you.
can.
Thank you so much, Barry. And of course, I enjoy your articles and contributions as well. It's been fantastic. And look, it's such an exciting space. I think LinkedIn is a great way to to grow everyone's orbit of this kind of conversation and to move this space forward. I just encourage users to just get started with AI, start playing around, start asking questions, start building a community, and then over time the proficiency and the confidence will grow, but it is very new and, understandable that this feels to many clinicians out of their comfort zone, because of how different the space is to what they're used to doing.
Fantastic. So if you like what you heard here, please follow us. I'm sure I'll catch up with David again in the future, given how quickly this thing's moving with new topics. So thanks for
Look,
having you, David, and thanks for sharing your really useful insights.
thank you so much. I
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Thank you.